Awesome. Welcome to Shooting the Crit with the Forever DMs. I'm your host tonight, Bill, with World Crafter for Astral Table and a member of Forever DMs. We have with us Gabriel. Take
Hey,
it off.
I'm Gabriel Miller, one of the dungeon masters for our ongoing series here at Forever DMs, a DM for life and an all around storyteller and maker of things. And Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Gregg. I am a DM. I've been playing D&D for like 18 years, and I'm also a writer.
Awesome.
Excited to join you guys.
Awesome. So one thing that we're discussing tonight is world crafting in D&D. Not just homebrew. We're talking about modules and things like that. And if you have any questions you want to shoot to our, smallish panel of experienced DMs, talking about your games, any questions you've ever had. We have some questions that were sent in beforehand that we're going to kind of jump through, but we will definitely take any questions from chat as it comes. So, let's just tear right into it.
Whoop whoop.
First question that we
Whoop.
have. What role do pre-written modules / adventures have in your world building?
Oh man, Patrick, I'm going to tag you on this one.
You want me to do this one?
Yeah.
All right. This is actually really funny because like I said, I've been playing D&D for like 18 years, and I just recently, like I want to say it was 3 years ago, we started it. Did my first module, Curse of Strife. It was the new 5th edition, Curse of Strife. And I will 100% recommend like a new DM to run a module, or at the very least, run an adventure. You don't have to run like an entire book, but just the people who write those modules, they put all the work in, they do all the checks, all the NPCs, things that you don't realize you have to put thought into. And oh man, even if you're just going to use it as bare bone, spine of your world, like it's so important to just have a foundation.
And I'm
Or
going to
why
actually,
not?
and I'm going to actually attack it from the opposite side. As somebody who very rarely uses module adventures, I'll still love to go in through them and take ideas out. Great example. You find like a heist gone wrong that your party has to investigate. That might be in a module in a setting, and I might go, "Oh, that's really cool," and take that out. But how am I going to tie that into the world at large? Taking those little pieces from modules may inform or change an entire culture of a town that a adventuring group is going to go to. So, from the world building perspective, I think that they can be super, super helpful and beneficial for helping you inform the world that the players are going to be interacting in. Great example. If you're going to play in Faerun, like
Mm, right.
or Eberron or in Ravenloft. Bill, and I
Yep.
know you're a Ravenloft fan from way back. We there's so much rich world already pre-existing, and you can take that pre-written material and run with it and grow with it. The first thing that comes to mind with that, Bill, is your Ravenloft idea with the military officers that unzip their sleeves and pull out the glass
Oh yeah,
capsules. Your
that
your
was
your Nazi invasion.
that was from that was from second edition.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
That's good
But when
stuff.
it comes to modules, I approach modules in my games as kind of an a la carte all you can eat buffet. It's like you take what you want,
Yes,
leave what you don't. And
absolutely.
when it comes to world building, like I've never actually run like a complete module. I'll be honest. In all the 25 years that I've been playing D&D,
Me neither.
never ran one cover to cover. Now here recently with some of the stuff that Wizards of the Coast is putting out, I'm tempted. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm tempted. Some of it's like really good, really solid because back during second edition, modules were literally, okay, pick your party up, put them in the plot wagon, and there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now they're planning in open world. It's like
They are.
that's amazing, and that's what I love. It's I think the one that blew me away the most was Tomb of Annihilation. Looking through it
Oh man.
and seeing that they planned
Oh yeah.
exploration in Chult, and I was like, wow, this is great. But that being said, if you're a first time DM, my suggestion to you is yes, run a module.
Absolutely.
Even before that, go on DM's Guild, go on RPG Drive-Thru. Sometimes they have these free one-shot adventures. I know Sandy Peterson right now has a free one-shot adventure called The Lonely Lighthouse, which actually, segueing into that, I took that adventure and made it part of my homebrew world and just ran it in one of the episodes of Straterra Breakfast and Dragons that we ran.
It was super spooky.
Yeah, it's very, very good. And it's a
I
completely free, like everything you need is right there in the adventure. He has it on his PetersonGames.com.
So I tell you what I did is recently I got my coworkers at work into D&D, and in order to segue them and not jump straight into like a crazy, insane module, I bought the starter set for one of my coworkers, and then just ran them through it, having very little experience with modules.
But
I'm not gonna lie, the new starter set is great.
Isn't it like the D&D Essentials Kit or something?
Yes,
Isn't that what
yes,
it's called?
they call it the Essentials Kit now. And I'm telling you, this is like perfect for first time people. And not only is it like, it's got a simple story, but it's open. Like you started in a town and you've got 4 plot hooks that you got to address and figure out what you want to take care of. And they have little cards for items, cards for NPCs, and you could easily rip from that and make your own world from it. Or you can use exactly what it has.
That's one thing I do with like adventures. Especially with my homebrew world of Straterra that I've been running for a long time. And a lot of the areas in that world has been inspired by other modules, other things like that.
Oh, yeah.
I've taken in, like Gabriel was saying, certain sections of modules. Like, I'll buy adventures when they come out, and I'll read through them. Like, just recently, Wizards of the Coast has released Candlekeep Mysteries. And it's absolutely, I gotta say, it's absolutely amazing how they're setting it up, because it can be used with any library, because every adventure is a book
You can just pull it out.
that you pull it from the library, and how they set that up, it's completely great. It's like, every fantasy world's going to have a library, unless you're running Conan the Barbarian worlds, in which I've done before. But
yeah, you can find the Forbidden Library then.
I mean,
oh man,
it's amazing. Like, modules are a good resource, whether you want to completely go cover to cover,
yes,
like if you're doing Adventure League or anything like that, but or if you just want to use it, as inspiration.
Like thinking back onto like my first 5 years of DMing and not using a single module, like I regret that.
Yeah.
I wrote everything. I like spent so much time just doing so much work, and I could have saved so much time just ripping things out of existing modules and adventures.
Well, like say I'm gonna take you guys to like an Arctic setting, or we're gonna go to Siberia. Like, okay, Rime of the Frost Maiden. Don't mind if I do. Yep. They've
Tons
got
of info.
They've got travel material. They've got flavor texts. Even if you change the name of the town, it still works. It's such a great resource.
I think that's an important thing to tell people, is that like you can use a module and change everything about it. First of all, your players aren't going to know any different. And second of all, it doesn't matter. It's your table. Like there's so many Post-it notes in my Curse of Strahd. It's a new book. Like, I could publish this.
Wizards might get so much mad.
Oh yeah, they might. But I rewrote a whole bunch of it because I didn't like it, and I'm still running the module, but so many things are different.
Awesome.
And it wasn't scary enough, so.
So, I can't think of anything else to add to that subject.
I think we're all on the exact same page. Like, pre-written modules and adventures,
I would say,
are so
a
much
good resource. Very good resource is Reddit. Going to like the Unearthed Arcana Reddit, the Homebrew Reddit, the DM behind the screen. There's so many people that are happy to give you free resources, and plenty of stuff to steal. Because let's be honest, being a DM is just stealing ideas from other people and quilting it together into your own world.
All right, let's see. Second question. How do you approach pantheons in your world building?
Ooh, I want to jump on this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there are so many really cool, rich pantheons in all the different versions of D&D and Greyhawk and Eberron and Faerun and I really like to ask more in-depth questions when it comes to religion. You know, you say you have several cultures that have grown up nearby each other, and there's no God walking the earth to prove their presence and power. How do those cultures develop their own religion questions? How do they create their own creation myths, and where do their ideals come from? Great example, the game we're running on Tuesdays, the Thrain campaign. That is one of the questions that's out there in that particular world. You know, if a character came and said, "I want to run a cleric," it's like, okay, well, let's talk about that. You don't know where your powers come from.
Yeah.
And I think one of the really cool, going back to Reddit here, one of the really cool Reddit posts I read when I was pondering how this would work was, are your deities ever present in your world? Do they walk?
Extremely important.
Do they walk the earth and prove themselves, prove their existence? Okay, well, if yes, then you kind of need to name them and develop their faiths. If no, then are there universal truths, or is it developed culture to culture? And for myself in this particular instance, I went with option 3. But you know, those 3 big columns of are your deities or is your pantheon in your player's face? Is it provable? Is it are they not exact beings you can define, but there are kind of universal ideals? Or is there an absence of it, which would lead more towards kind of real world thoughts and feelings? You know, we have on here on Earth, we have Christianity as a huge religion, but if you wind back several hundred years and go to China, Japan, Mongolia, any of these further away from Europe cultures, you have totally different belief structures and faith systems and ideas about literally how the earth was formed. So, you know, you can do that without having, you know, Illimatter coming down and throwing out the hand of God. Or you can go back that way. Again, the D&D books have such great, rich pantheons to draw from. But, you know, you can also step away from them with your world building and ask different questions.
That's a good way to approach it. The way I've always approached religions is very similar to, I'm a big history buff, and to me, there's no set pantheon. Religions wax and wane when it comes to cultures themselves. So you'll have all gods within, like, any of the pantheons might have been worshipped at one time and just fallen out of favor. You know, it's like no one worships the sun god Ra anymore on Earth, but you know, at one time a lot of people did. But in speaking of world building, let's, you know, talking about my world, Straterra, which is like one of the, you know, the world that I've concentrated on a lot over the years. There was a period where, I mean, over the world, there is a unified belief in a balance. The balance must always be maintained. whenever a deity steps foot on the world, the balance is broken, and then all the deities are punished in a way to where they cannot influence the world for a time, and it's called an age of strife. Um, Throughout the period, there's been several ages of strife, usually that goes after what's called a faith war, and a faith war is determined when one god actually tries to influence itself over the others, and a war between believers is fought. This this has influenced the history of my world several times, to the point that the gods now have a purpose of there's new gods that are popping up because a lot of the old ones don't answer prayers anymore after
Mm-hmm.
what was called the Night of Absolution or the Night of Falling Stars, and where something happened and the old gods stopped answering questions, and then new gods started popping up after this one, and so magic stopped working for a long time, and now magic is coming back, and everyone's trying to understand why, and that's the time period set in Straterra currently. And so it's it's an overall question that the players can go out there and search if they want to. If they're curious, they're like, what are these new gods? Where's these new powers coming from? Or they can just go off and go someplace else and just, if they care about religion, if they care about the deities, if they care about the Pantheon, they can invest it. They don't have to.
Right.
I
Right.
like that as a really cool balance between those three different columns I was talking about, where you have defined deities, but they're not around anymore, but they were there. And now there are new defined deities, but we don't really know who they are, so we're kind of in this weird universal beliefs area, but also the questions of like, okay, new deities are popping up. Is that because of religions? Is that because of cultures, or who's worshiping? That's like a really cool question to ask
Yeah.
as a balance between those three approaches.
So I'm gonna get ready to flex on you real quick. I studied mythology and folklore and legends at
Nerd.
university. I know. Um, and so when I built my world, and one of my players is here, so I'll say it, whatever. Um, I basically made it so that it was a living pantheon, and just like what we have nowadays in Earth. I'm not going to put my own beliefs into my world, so of course, like there's a creation, and there's the gods that are worshipped, and there's like gods like Bill was saying. Sometimes gods fall and fall out of power. People think that they're not having sway anymore, so it's easy to like mold new gods. And so one of my favorite allegories to use is the idea of like the Titans in Greek mythology versus the gods, like the Olympians. And it was the idea of there's the old gods, but the new gods got rid of them or pushed them out of the way. In reality, the humans have no clue what happened. They just know that there's all these ancient, the god of the earth and the sun, and like very simple, mundane elemental aspects. And then you have new gods that relate to things that people can relate to, like agriculture, fertility, the hearth, like things like that. And so having an evolving pantheon to me is really indicative of the cultures, and it shows more of the world. And so in my world, I had it, and my players wouldn't know it, but the power's the same. So like, say that you're a cleric and you worship the goddess of love. That's the same power the whole time, but a different god is representing that power at different times. And so when the character is playing, they might be worshiping this minor deity, but in reality, that person was a real person. And stories have been told about that person. And so people associate love with that person. In reality, they don't know if that person's a god. Does their faith make that person a god? Or was that person a god before the faith came to them?
See,
Or it's such a weird twist.
I like it.
I go to the different extreme. Like one thing that I took from reading the Dragonlance novels growing up
Oh
is
man.
they would have gods, but depending upon what culture, what race you were, that god was a different name.
Yes,
I love that growing
me
up,
too.
and that's one thing that I have in my world is you could have, say, in my world there was Ishtar. She was the goddess of love and war.
Right.
Um, you could have two completely different kingdoms worshiping the same god under different names for different. You can have a kingdom over
Yeah.
here worshiping her as Ares, in a different representation and worship war. And you have another kingdom that worships her as Ishtar and worship her as the goddess of love. It's the same goddess,
Yes.
but they could have different belief systems and be at war over that. And I mean,
I,
And that will
I think on that,
affect their culture
yeah.
absolutely.
within their area so deeply too.
And
That's a really important note for like new DMs, that it's very easy to just take the pantheon that Wizards gives you, like the Faerun standard pantheon, just change their name. Any culture is going to call upon that god in a different way. Um, an example is like you said with Ares. Like, just imagine the concept of war. Everyone is going to worship war in some way, or abhor it, or abide by it, or whatever. They'll call it something different, but in the world building aspect, it's one thing. Like, war is war. Now,
us-
your world could have two gods of war. Now that's a totally different,
Yeah.
like, you're getting into like gods battling each other, and that's a totally different aspect.
it's usually what I'll do, and like if we're talking about world building, like clean slate.
Yeah.
Um, and this is how I built Stratera over the years. Is I let the players bring stuff in,
Oh, me
and
too.
I do it with races. I do it with religions. If someone says, "Hey, I really want to make a cleric of the traveler," you know what? I never had the traveler in Stratera before. I'm not going to tell them no. I'll be like, okay, let's come in. I'll tell them I've never had this god in my world before. How
Hmm.
would you fit it in there? Do you want it to be a brand new religion? You want to be an old religion that's kind of worshipped in secret as if a cult? And we'll talk it out. We'll hash it out. We'll spitball it. We'll get it rolling. And
That
then
session zero is so important.
I'll make it part of Stratera's lore now. It's like, hey, I've got a new deity worshipped by this player, and I work it into it. It's the same thing as
I love that.
new races get released all the time. Never had Flurbogs before in my world. Jacob wants to play Furbogs. Well, guess what? Jacob and I sat here and hashed it out. Where does Furbogs come from? So I came up with the idea. Furbogs have been around all the time, but
You just didn't see them.
they're they're like Bigfoot. They're a myth. They're a legend. And
That's so
so
good.
and that was one thing that came into it. They live in the north and they're very rare, and like people are surprised. It's like, hey, I saw a furbog out on a a walk, and they come up and they're just this friendly little dude.
Hide and seek champions.
Yes,
It's like, how you doing? And
we win.
but that's when it comes to bringing stuff into my world. That's how I approach it. Is I never tell a player no. I go, work with me. Let's get this going.
Well, you mentioned
So yeah, go ahead.
taking stuff from scratch, like from the very beginning, and I think that so many, especially newer DMs, worry so much about the minutia of all of those things. And I think pantheons and religion, beliefs, spirituality, whatever, they can all impact a story depending on the direction you and your players take it. But an important piece of advice, I think, the more we talk about it and how in depth we can all really get into it, is don't overthink it. Don't
Yeah,
don't worry about, okay, what god has this and what god has that and how have they been at war with this. Much like Bill's living world for over 2 decades here, it will evolve as you tell stories.
And one lesson that I can give new DMs: getting gods involved, that's high level stuff. Just worry about the low level stuff. Just like really, unless your characters are level 20, that's when gods are gonna really start getting involved probably. So like, start off with don't worry about it.
I. It's such a nuanced thing. So for me, it's important because you have clerics and paladins and druids, and there's so many potentials for a character to draw upon a power of a god, whether or not you have a druid who draws upon nature, just in general. Not necessarily a god. There might be a god of nature that some people worship, but the druid is like, no, 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 I don't worship the god. I just take the power from nature. Just like you could have a cleric who's like, I don't worship the god of love. My power is from just love everywhere. or whatever. I don't like to have a cleric has to have a god, but you got to have that delineation of like how do they interact with your characters, and like you said, like you can leave them vague. The whole point of mythology is to be vague. Like there's so many missing links. Zeus has so many contradictory stories. Like
Yeah.
it's that's the whole point.
But I mean, it comes down to cultures as well. It's like in Straterra,
Yeah.
we just introduced a culture that's been hidden in my world for a long time, and that was ancient Arcadia. Ancient Arcadia approached religion in an interesting way. There was a bunch of different gods. There was a pantheon, but their clerics, they did focus on one god, but most of them just saw it as the pantheon. They worshipped all the gods in different representation of itself, and they call them the Kaatia. And so they would, like a normal person, unless you were a direct cleric of Bahamut or the Dawnfather or anything like that, you just worshipped and you prayed to the Kaatia, to the pantheon of the gods, to the ones that maintain the balance. And that was another way that, it was just really quick, oh, I'm a
Yeah.
cleric. I worship the Kaatia. Okay, which one? It doesn't matter. I worship them all.
That there's in Eberron they do a very similar thing where I think is it the Sovereign Host or the Silver Flame. It's kind of the generic force of good.
Yeah.
Silver Flame.
Thank you. It's there are lots of different deities tied in, but instead of getting bogged down in like, okay, these are
Who?
this and this is the good of the color blue and this is the good of sunrise, and instead of having all of
Yep.
these different things, it's just this one kind of blanketed
Yeah.
these this is the quote, big air quotes, good religion. That was almost painful.
Yeah.
But the that's another great way to approach it for new DMs is to just say, if you want to be a cleric or you want to be a druid that has a religious aspect to it, whatever, you want to be a religious character, you're level 1, it's a new DM on your first adventure. I want to go to the temple. Okay, you go to the, big air quotes, temple in town.
Yep.
There are shrines to a bunch of different things. Cool. You talk to the cleric. The cleric gives you your plot hook, and you go on to the next place. Like you don't have to get bogged down in the super minutia detail, especially starting out as a DM.
Oh yeah.
See, and Gabriel's familiar with this. It's like one thing I did in my world. I get sick of like, clerics having to hunt down different temples for different gods and everything like that, and there being a balance in my world. Every major settlement, even smaller ones, had what was called a god circle, because it was a belief that every god should be worshipped, and no god held it above it. There would be little shrines outside of every town that would be a circle. Richer communities had it made out of stone. Larger ones had like full temples dedicated to it, but it was a simple circle with a small shrine of every god represented.
And that's
And
a great way to approach it. Almost like the Roman Catholics
It's
do saints.
and
yeah,
yes, it's and historically that's accurate. Like a lot of
yeah,
ancient pantheons did that.
and
You would just one altar.
as always, I think we could sit here forever and talk about religion, fantasy religion.
I do have one more thing I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
I had a player in one of my campaigns, and like you mentioned earlier, like characters don't interact with gods physically until you're like way higher level. This was like 4th edition, so you get to like level 25 or whatever, and you start getting divine. And I had a player come to me and say, I want my character to like strive to confront his god. And his god was a justice. And we ended the campaign with a big cataclysmic thing and all that stuff. And I like wanted him to have that moment of deification, almost like an interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea of like in like normal Catholics have like the saints trials.
Mm-hmm.
I almost laid out like what it takes to be a god of an aspect. And if so many people believe that you represent that aspect, why wouldn't you be? If you're powerful enough to move mountains, you're a level 20 character, and if you're a wizard and you can do time stop, like who wouldn't believe you're a god if you walked into your village and pulled off some tricks like that? And incorporating that into a religion is really important. especially one of my favorite things is to put minor gods. So you might have like a god of war and a god of love, but I'll have a god of like mercy, or the stars, or justice, and like they're not like necessarily like a wholesale god, like they have a whole pantheon, but like people will whisper like, oh man, that's the god of chance. Don't mess with him. He'll ruin your day if you get on the wrong side of it. In reality, it's an adventurer that got to that high level and he just does whatever he wants now and enjoys life.
That's almost like an
Like the
American
traveler.
Gods. That's almost like an American Gods approach to
Absolutely.
Pantheon, which is we can add a whole nother category there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
The important part is the interaction. Players to gods, there's got to be something, but like you said, you can start with nothing, vague,
I'm just I'm just gonna
and as
make a
they
world
go.
where there's only one god and it's Colonel Mac.
I
That's it. It's like
love it.
That's good.
everybody's got to worship the Colonel Mac.
Yeah, I could talk about mythology forever.
All right, what you got next, Bill?
So, how to make travel interesting from a world building perspective.
Ooh,
I can take this one.
sure.
I've got a really interesting document that I've kept for a very long time. And this varies, and I will preface it by saying that there's a difference between having a high magic world and a low magic world. And so for me, I never ran a high magic world. I've never ran a world where magic is mundane everywhere and everyone can prestidigitate a broom to clean their house or whatever. Um, but I loved rolling for things that people could see along the way, and I left hints of magic into it. One of my favorite ones was players running through, and they were traveling between two towns, and I was honestly like, I could just fade to black, and then they arrive at the town. I was like, that's boring. I don't want to do an encounter. I want them to get to the town, but I wanted to give them like a sense of journey, and so I told them like, this is what it looks like on your journey. This is what you're going through, and then I rolled and found like my weird table had like tiny chicken was the rolling on the table, and they're like 4-inch tall chicken. And so I had them just come to a spot in the road, and like they noticed these chickens, and they got closer to them, and they didn't get bigger. And they were like, "Yeah, they're tiny chickens." And so the characters had this really adorable 5-10 minute moment of just enjoying these tiny chickens on the side of the road. And then they were like, "Okay, we got to move on. We got a bigger goal ahead of us. Let's go ahead and go." But like the idea of like that has nothing to do with any story. It has nothing to do with anything they're doing. But like as they're going, they're seeing things, they're meeting people, they're interacting with things. It doesn't have to be combat. It could be fully exploratory. And like that's what a journey's about. Like Lord of the Rings, when they're going over the rivers in towards Gondor or towards Mordor, and there's those two giant statues on either side of the river. A normal person watching those movies and reading those books has no clue who those people are. But like it could mean so many things. They could investigate it. They could find out what it is. Or it's just two statues on the side of the river, and that's it.
The
And you move
Argonath.
on. Yep.
I'm the dork who knows who they are.
Oh yeah.
It's leading into that. I approach travel as I love making my random encounter charts, and when I do my random encounter charts, I don't just plan combat. Like, yeah, there'll be some
Good.
combat
Yeah.
in there, but I put in there like funny events that make you think,
Yes.
or
Yes.
just beautiful things they come across. And what I do
Juve is
is
a perfect example of that.
it's not a I don't want I make it a skill challenge is what I do, because they're not going to get every day of a journey. I don't want them to have a random encounter, because that bogs down and slows down story.
Yeah.
So the skill check that I do is I ask someone, okay, who's helming this journey to make sure you guys stay on track, and who's helping them. And if someone's helping them, I will say, what skill are you going to use? Tell me how you use it. Roll, and if you get above a 10, then the person helming the journey can roll with advantage. And when they roll with advantage, that way it's a party skill check in a way.
Yeah.
And if they roll in with advantage, I won't roll on the random table. And they don't get lost for that day or anything like that. But it it comes into, it makes it
Noted.
interesting. What?
Noted.
So, but I'll give examples of. I had a game where the people went through the Dreamlands. The Dreamlands, those are familiar with Lovecraft. Dreamlands are very big. It's, the place where everyone has a dream self. It's a whole world unto itself. I had the party roll, and they rolled pretty low, and I rolled a random encounter. And it was a random encounter that I really enjoyed, where they got to meet an Androsphinx, and it could have been someone that they could fight, but actually it was an Androsphinx whose mate had gone missing and on a journey and had not returned yet, and he was lonely, and all he asked for the party to do was to cuddle him while he slept.
And I cuddled the
And
hell out of him.
That's adorable.
and it was just a simple, sweet moment that the party, they were very questioning. They're like, "Oh, wait a second, you know, what's going on? Is this really a bad guy?" And the party just went for it, and they stayed with it, and it was a great little scene role played, and it was wonderful. And it was just a completely different, completely out there, different type of encounter that opened up the idea of anything could happen in the Dreamlands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found his name. It was Auroran.
Auroran, yeah, it's a great
My
character. Love playing him.
I want to jump in there.
yeah.
We've both kind of talked about not every travel moment has to be combat, right? And approaching things from a world building perspective, and how am I narrating and painting the picture of where you are? Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films do such a great job of really changing the tone of every location with the visuals. And in this medium, our primary tool for that is our words. So let's say, for instance, you guys are traveling across a region called the Horodran Plains. So Gabriel, as the GM, is going to find an image that somewhat represents what that looks like. And then I will think, how do I describe this image? It's almost like going to an art gallery, and how do you, so let's say you and I are standing in front of the same landscape picture, mysterious viewer and I, how do I describe it to you?
Yes.
And so, we've got our tables and our moments. We've had a couple of really cool ones in both of the games we're streaming, as well as the other ones we've played over the years. But I love descriptors, and Bill, your character Jubei is a great example that you wander off the road and look for fruit and just enjoy, berries and vegetables and just enjoy the scenery, and you really are kind of trying to live in that zeitgeist in that moment. And so it really pushes me as a GM to describe adequately what Jubei is experiencing. Great example. You are traveling down a road in the woods, and you come to a large stone pillar that's slightly cockeyed, sticking out of the ground, and the ground around it is warmer. This is something we've done in our games here recently. But just that moment of, okay, this is worked stone, but it's old, and you can't really put your finger on what it is, but it gives that sense of that lived-in universe. It gives that sense of people have been here. And then, describing the fruit trees that are growing there in this warmer pocket of air. Or if we're going to go across some vast plains, how do I describe that to you? We use, I know we all use atmosphere art where we can, pictures that we've found online that represent kind of a good feel of what we're going for. Patrick, I remember one of your Strahd games, seeing all the sanatorium pictures up online and just feeling spoopy as hell. But, that description. Making travel interesting was the original question, and so coming
Yeah.
back to that, like the way I describe the area around you as a GM, if your party is traveling through a swamp, tell them what it smells like.
Yes.
If
All five senses.
if they're traveling through an Arctic tundra, tell them why their feet are numb.
Yeah.
You know, just those tiny little details. You are traveling through a tropical region. Tell them about this flower that they see, this beautiful yellow flower on this sea of vines. You know,
And just to add something real quick,
absolutely.
if you're in an Arctic setting, be sure to tell them if it's snowing, they can't see but 10 feet ahead of them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Perception check with super disadvantage.
I'm sorry, there is a such thing as snow blindness.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, to use another show as an example, I know the world out there is all fairly familiar with Critical Role at this point. I am way behind, so please don't spoil anything. Uh,
I won't.
but but they had this series of adventures where they were traveling across an Arctic tundra, and they may still be there, but I'm like 7 episodes behind or something, so they may not. But uh, every day was a different encounter. Going back to your snowblind, like a sleet storm rolled in and blinded them, and they got lost. Or
Yep.
let's say I'm taking you through a bamboo forest. Navigating a bamboo forest is actually really difficult compared to navigating a normal forest. So
All looks the same.
how do I use my words to describe that?
Yeah.
Or, you know, you're in this jungle and you're looking for water sources and you find a water source, but it's a jungle and a water
Yeah.
source. So you also find all this wildlife. What does that wildlife look like? You know,
How do they react?
those little descriptors paint the picture of everything going on in that region and really make it feel unique. It helps your party
Absolutely.
feel like they have traveled from A to B to C and so on.
I think.
Another,
Yeah.
no, I was just gonna add, when you're describing places to go, it's like think about your world also and the feel. No one in this world is gonna know how your world feels other than the DM itself. And it is your job to express that to your players. And it's like I keep going back to just Stratera. It's a world with layers and layers of history and culture built on top of each other of waning and falling empires. So I will describe through, travel, you guys spot a ruin off in the distance. It's so aged and so broken, you can't really determine what it used to be, but it's there. You guys pass through a broken gate that used to cover this road, and a long time ago, the road could have been beaten off by someone else, but everyone has maintained going through this ancient gate, and the road just continues through there. And it's like there's no evidence of the culture that it belonged to, but it was once here. It might just be an archway that's still there,
And it makes
you
you
know,
feel like it is a place that is alive.
That's
that
the
that was
best
lived
compliment
in.
you can get is a player saying, "Oh, I felt like I was there."
Yeah.
Like that's such a good moment. I so I have a couple examples that I want to share because we've touched on it, we haven't said it, but exploration is one of the main pillars of D&D, and journaling and traveling is like absolutely one of the most important times to do that, to explore. And there are a couple things that stick out to me that I always use when I'm doing exploration. One is my partner, my spouse. She is hard of hearing, and I have had to describe sounds and stuff to her before. And like Gabe was saying, like it goes back to the ancient analogy of describing a color to a blind person. But like my wife can't hear certain frequencies and stuff, and explaining that to her can almost be a game in itself. Like, what does this feel like? What does this remind you of? Is there a texture for this sound? There's like thinking descriptively of something that doesn't normally have a descriptor. Isn't like Gabe said, we're just speaking. Everything we do is just spoken. But like we want them to see and feel and hear and smell the world around them. So like describing to my spouse like how something sounded so mundane to me, but after breaking through that, I was like, whoa, I can describe sounds. in a whole new way,
It
and it changed.
sounds it sounds like the screech that makes your teeth hurt.
My favorite was she couldn't hear the bass of a guitar, and I said it's like a purring of a cat on your chest, and it's like a gentle guitar, and she was like, "Whoa, that's awesome! I love that feeling."
I
And I
love
was
it.
like, "There you go."
But
Um,
it's also when you're describing stuff in your world, it's your world. Get animated, get
yes,
happy,
yes,
use your
yes.
emotions. You can just sit back in your chair and go, well, you come across this. It doesn't matter how much detail you're putting into this. If you're not putting the emotions
Feel
into
it.
your voice, you're making your players fall asleep.
Yes.
Yeah.
My
It's like
second
you have to.
my second example is one of my favorite history stories I ever tell people is a Roman soldier. This is about 40 AD. Came to Egypt and saw the pyramid, and he wrote a letter home to his wife. And he wrote he couldn't believe that someone 2,000 years ago had created these structures taller than any structure he had seen in Rome, built of stones from nowhere near the site, placed in the middle of the desert with gold on the top of it. It looked like something that the gods had made. And he wrote this back to his wife. And here we are, 2,000 years after that dude wrote that letter, still looking at the pyramids. And like Bill was saying, like these ancient things, like we don't know what it was like to stand there with the pyramids. That Roman didn't know what it was like to stand there with the pyramids. And here we are, like, I guess, like, it's all about the description. It's all about, like, making someone feel like they're there in that moment. What was that there for? What could it have been? Why was it put there? That
Absolutely.
All right.
descriptive flavor.
So we got 3 more questions.
Awesome.
Um, gonna go ahead and move us along to the next one because number 5 I'm actually interested in talking
Well, let's
about
jump
because
straight to it.
Yeah, we can go right
number
to it.
yeah, number 5 is my bread and butter. It's tips or tricks to make cultures, towns, and regions feel unique and different. So I'm the host, but
Do
I want
it.
to take
Do it,
over.
Bill.
So
Take it.
this is what I really love about storytelling and in my world. One, being a history buff as I am,
Hmm.
most of my regions in my world or in worlds that I run are based off of real regions in our Earth. Because what else can feel real but something that we really live with? And I'll give you an example of I have a nation in my world, the nation of Loss. Loss is made up of city states of that used to be warring kingdoms that were united under one high king, and they're called the United City States. It's based off of ancient Earth. It's based off of what America would have been if America was formed in the medieval times. It's basically all these separate city states that were run by great houses, and they're now run by the houses that form the states into the Lords of Loss. Um, which they don't have a king, but that's another story because their king line died off. But that's just like a small example of let's go into the island that the people or that the party's on right now. I wanted an island that's small that had its own culture about it in many different regions. And I based it off in my mind the island of Nantucket here in America. And I wanted this one settlement to be the prominent settlement in the town. And it ended up being, based around Nantucket. Okay, what would be they're in the Sea of Teeth that freezes most of the year. What would be their main source of agriculture or anything like that? Whaling. Okay, so I was like, okay, so they're whalers. So for long periods of time, their ships are gone and they're left alone.
Yep.
All right, so that I ended up like, okay, they're going to have whaling refineries. And what does whaling refineries have? They have runoff. Okay, well, oil on water ends up being a rainbow slick. So their bay is called Rainbow Bay. And it's constantly got this sheen of whale oil over it that just mixes with the water that gives vibrant colors that when they go. And it's something I can describe to my players. Going into the mountain ranges, I have what I call the Dust Monastery. The party hasn't gotten there yet, but it's a sect of monks that everyone keeps talking about on the island. They're weird. They keep saying, "Oh, they're weird. They eat the dead. They eat the dead." That's based off of a religion in New Guinea and Brazil, where there's this group of religious followers that believe they drink and they eat the tea of people of after the funeral rite when they burn the body. It's part of their religion. and it's something that I took from real world aspects, added it to my world. They're not necessarily bad people. It's just part of their religion of
Yeah.
what they go to. And of course, the cultures around them just think it's weird. Um, but I draw a lot from history. I draw a lot from things like that. It's like the main big bad in my world, Emperor Vandal, who kept coming back and coming back. He started off as a nomadic. Um, I'm thinking, think of the
Long
of a
day.
of a yeah, and he was a raider,
Yeah.
in the plains of this world. And he ended up finding a kingdom and building it on himself. He's based loosely on Genghis Khan, and just the invasion force and the massive army he built that he ended up just forming his own kingdom.
Using those
It's
historical references is so easy to draw from because, like you said, we
Yeah,
have these real world analogous
Oh yeah.
moments. One of the things that I really love about it is using it kind of a little bit in conjunction with the previous question, using it to make the areas feel like a progression. One thing that I did not like, small literary reference here, one thing I did not enjoy about the Wheel of Time is that everywhere felt the same to me.
Ugh, same.
Like there, until we got out into the ale wastes, everywhere felt
Yep.
like the same place.
It's all Europe. It's all Europe.
Most traditional fantasy literature is based in predominantly Scandinavian or European
Yep.
geology. And if you want to make a place feel unique, take a piece of somewhere else. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to put your party in the Sahara by any means. But if you take a little area and have there be no trees and rolling hills, a town that is based in that area will feel, by the nature of its geography, very, very different than a town on the River
Yeah.
Thames.
Absolutely.
You can take
Also, magic.
also magic, but you can, if this town is based on the plains, well, maybe they do a lot of farming, or maybe they instead of having a small plot of land where they have their little garden, they have thousands of acres that they can look and work with. Or if you are in a swamp region, finding a way to make that area unique, what can be a unique resource brought from the region.
my go-to is always peat.
Yep, I was about to say peat. You've got bogs, you've got peat. Okay, cool. Maybe they make a Scotch analogous liquor, and maybe that's their big export. So that whole town can be built around that industry.
Apple,
Coming in.
apple smack.
Apple smack, yeah. Maybe they make moonshine and flavor it like apple pie. Who knows? Or
Which is actually a thing, and it's delicious.
another great trick for making a culture or a town unique is make them mad at the other town.
Yeah.
It sounds so silly, but think in Fair
It worked.
Verona, where
Yep.
our tale, you have the Montagues and the Capulets in Romeo and Juliet at war with each other, living in the same town. Well, why don't just pick them up and put them in separate towns? They're damn near the same people, but
Yep.
make them mad at each other, and they're constantly feuding over the dumbest thing that nobody can remember.
It's like Athens
Suddenly,
and Sparta. Why?
yeah, suddenly that spot on the map will be incredibly memorable to your party.
I mean,
Yep.
and it's like I had in the nation of Lost in my world right now in the time period, Lost is controlled by a church that is very zealous, and they believe magic was a sin. They even target certain races like tieflings and dragonborns. They believe that they are beyond redemption, to where they seek refuge. The party knew this, and the party ended up in this town called Harper's Ferry, and they started seeing a lot of dragonborn and a lot of tieflings, and they're like, how are these dragonborn and tieflings walking around? It's like my wife Trish in this game, she plays a tiefling who's constantly hiding herself from the church when they're in loss. Um, so they come to find out that one of the higher ups, one of the bishops in the church, is selling indulgences. Those of you that are familiar with,
Roman
Catholic
Catholic
history,
history, yeah.
Roman Catholic history. So for a proper amount of gold coin, these tieflings and these dragonborn can spend money just to exist. And this is a horrible thing that the party, realizes going on in this region, and they take it upon themselves to try to fix the situation. And it's a different feel than everything that's going on around it. It's something you got to think that, yeah, you've got this big, strong, super powerful religion. Well, this little town that this one bishop controls himself, he's going to do stuff in his own pocket.
Well,
Different from that.
spinning off the city official idea, I'm going to throw a spoiler out for the Castlevania cartoon.
I love that. Use that for Stride exclusive.
So, there is a character in the Castlevania cartoon who is a city official, and one of the first things the characters notice, and one of the first things they ask this official when they get in town is, "Where are all the children?"
Oh yeah.
And I'm not going to say anything else because I don't want to spoil it, because it's such a cool twist. But, make a city official make a callous joke about a lack of children.
Yep.
And that will immediately make your party look at the area differently.
The hunter on Providence Islands that you guys just happen to come across.
Yes. Another great example. He's out there prospecting, essentially, for a creature that can help him prospect.
Verimvirax.
Deep pull there. What was another part of that culture?
But the fact is, you guys didn't realize what was going on the island and going on with Sorrowbend until he mentioned that those guys are weird.
That's a great example. How do you make a culture interesting? Curse them.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
There, to use the literary reference with Wheel of Time, there's a town that keeps reliving the same day over and over and over again. You can have a town or a region cursed with apathy. Oh, that's nothing to worry about. It got to a point where we as the party were paranoid and making jokes and uncomfortable and laughing at ourselves about there was nothing to worry about that somebody just got murdered in the street.
But the fact is the party, constantly the NPCs are saying, oh, it's nothing to worry about, not caring about anything until you guys met that
somebody
hunter
not
in
from
the
there.
woods,
Yeah.
and said, man, these guys are weird. I started seeing it click all together in the party's heads. Wait a second. This guy's right.
And that's such a cool way to make a region feel unique. I'm going to shift it just a little bit. Another great way to make a culture or a region feel unique is put the women in charge.
Sadly, you have to say that it is true.
I hate that I have to say that, but if you look at European history as where a lot of fantasy literature is drawn from culturally, the men are predominantly in charge and the women are not. Horrible society model. Please don't take.
I would extend that to most other myths too. Middle East, Asian.
No argument. But how about if you want a town to feel so unique, or a tribe or a culture feel so unique, make them matriarchal. I'm going to pull a reference as we're pulling from different games and worlds we've run. There is a culture in the world we're running currently with Thrain where it is a matriarchal society. And if a woman, and this is actually pulled from a South American tribe, and I'm gonna blank on the name here as I'm trying to remember, an indigenous South Americans tribe. But the entire tribe is viewed as mother. So every woman in the tribe is viewed as a child's mother. They are a honorific. They help raise the child. Everyone in the tribe helps raise the child. He is a child of the tribe, he or she. But any man that the woman had laid with within the last year is now considered a father of a new
Yes,
child. Like,
that's actually common in lots. Yeah,
taking that little piece of culture from somewhere else that's so different from what we know as traditional Anglo-Saxon or even Judeo-Christian belief structures
yeah,
and
oh
society
yeah,
structures can make make a group of peoples or a culture or a town feel so incredibly unique that your players will remember it forever.
So
I yeah, I was gonna go on along the lines of like we're building a fantasy world and we have magic, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh man, it's clearly magic, but like things are different, whether it's a river that flows uphill or you know trees that grow sideways, like it doesn't matter, like just things are different, and there's no limit to what a DM can make in his world that can be slightly different from what's normal in the world. Whether it and like anything can spark interest. In Curse's Rod, I had them walk through an area of forest where no birds made noise, and it wasn't that there was no birds. There are plenty of birds. They just do not make noise when they're in that area of wood. And there could be a variety of reasons why birds would not make noise, whether it's predators, whether it's whatever. But like just a single thing that sounds normal, like Gabe was saying, here's the Indo-European normal. Just pick something out that's different. All right, now that's going here. Whether it's a sound in a forest or the rushing of a stream, or the people here, all their hair stands up like static all the time. No one
there's
knows why.
there's one scene from the TV show Firefly that if you're a DM and you're making a new culture, I want you to think of every time you're trying to make a new culture. It's Wash going. I was once on a planet where the pastime was juggling geese,
Little
and it's
baby goslings.
little baby gosling. It's basically that reads into me as every town has its quirks. Every town
Yeah,
has its differences. Everything, comes down to
absolutely.
it, and it's little tidbits of things will just make it come alive to you. It's like a good example is the Dreamlands again. The city of Uthar, taking it straight from Lovecraft mythology. The
Oh
city of
yeah,
Uthar where no one may harm a cat.
the cats.
Yep.
Cats everywhere. Like in this
Don't mess
freaking
with those
town.
cats.
It's like cats everywhere in this freaking town, and like it smells bad. You can describe it to your players.
Oh yeah, it's the
But
Dreamlands, but there's still smell.
yeah, I mean it's that's the thing is sit here and you can say that you don't harm a cat in Uthar.
Yeah,
Okay,
Gabe.
why?
Gabe mentioned the idea of like pulling something that's so alien to like what we know. And I hate doing this. It's so sad that it's only in science fiction, but science fiction is such a good example of like where you can find things that are so different. And I'm not going to tell you to go read, Ursula Le Guin or Isaac Asimov or whatever. I think the best example to go to is like Star Trek or a series like that where you're traveling from world to world. Star Trek was really
Stargate.
good about like Stargate was great about showing a different culture, and in that time they just showed it as like very different from now or utopia or opposite or whatever. And it was a perfect example of like here's a planet with no gender. That was Ursula Le Guin did that in her book. Um, but like, here's a planet where they don't have a religion. They like completely outlaw. Like, you are not allowed to even mention God. Here's a planet where, or like even Stormlight Archives. Everyone covers their left hand. Okay, why? Why? Why is everyone covering their left hand?
He never tells you.
You don't need to know. It's different,
Yep.
and it's poignant, and it's like not what we experience normally. Though obviously it's different. Whether it's a matriarchal society, no gender, covering your
Well,
safe hand.
You mentioned it's magic, right? So
Yes.
a deep pull that I want to pull from a magic reference. Um, is there, if you look back in the Drizzt Do'Urden series and go back through some of his time in the Underdark, there were whole societies that farmed surface dwelling farm food in a cave.
Yes.
Like, why not?
Magic.
It's magic, right? You
Yeah.
have a permanent artificial star in a cave that can
Yep.
grow normal crops. And this town found it, and they figure, well, we can't just leave it there, so we might as well build a town around it. And now they're the premier exporter of wheat in the region. Like, you
Yes.
can run with it
My
fantastically.
favorite thing that I've ever done is my players walked close to a town. They could see the town in the distance. There's a sign on the road, a road going off the side, and it says, "Do not walk this way. Bees." And the players were like, okay, bees? And I was like, no. And it turned out that, like, long story short, they investigated it. This massive colony of bees had a trade agreement with the town. And they traded, and the bees gave honey to the town. And the town exported that honey everywhere. And it made amazing mead, it made amazing meals. And it was just literally a tiny thing of, like, if a person can speak to animals, why wouldn't you make a trade agreement with bees? And now you don't have to fight them. You can just get honey from bees.
That sounds like someone.
That's
Magic.
hilarious. I love
Like
it.
someone watched the the bee movie when they got all their honey back, and they're like, "Wait a second."
I mean, whatever it takes, it's magic, man. It's magic.
Now, see,
ba-
now I want to play Honey Heist.
Basically, we've already answered the question, which was number 4, with all the references we've been making. Do you
So
draw
many
from
ways to do it.
fictional literatures, and how? I think we've
All
already
day
answered
long.
that. Yeah, we've already answered it. I know someone messaged me, Patrick. If you need to go to the potty, go ahead.
I will.
I'll cover something coming up. If it's another really good book series, is called Sacred Throne, and Sacred Throne series is a really good series when it comes to cultures. And one of the things they dip into the idea of a traveling culture, of a nomadic culture, like the Romani, like the Vistani, which the Vistani are a race of people I absolutely love in D&D. I brought them into Straterra. There's a deeper lore in Straterra when it comes to the Vistani, but one thing that I like the most about this lore series, or the Sacred Throne series, when it's talking about other cultures, other nomadic cultures, they were matriarchal, but they were only ruled by women that lost a child. And to me,
That's such a cool concept.
That was amazing. It's like if they lost a child, they became a matriarch for the tribe. And so you had these women that they believe had to know loss to be able to rule, and they were complete rulership over the tribe. They ran the caravans. It's amazing. So my message out there is just read books. Like, go out there and read. And
the old now it's Star Wars Legends, but
Yeah.
the old canon that was washed away with the Disney acquisition. There were so many different book series. Like, I grew up reading all of that. We've had this conversation 1,000 times, Bill. But there's so many different.
We can't talk about the Force. We can't sit here and have like a 6-hour conversation on.
Nope, not allowed.
Yeah.
Because we would. Is it the Living Force? So, going through those old novels, you can find all these different planets and cultures and ideals and races and applications of technology that you can rewrite as magic in a D&D or fantastical setting. Another prime example of ways to make things interesting is take a look at the Eberron source material. There is a rich plethora of literature out there, but there is a magical city that has different tiers that you can access by different stairs or elevators or portals, or so you've got a major metropolis that can span a huge swath of space, or maybe you have a huge metropolis crammed into a tiny little space. Everybody tells you the city is massive, this city is massive, and you get there and there is an inn and a doorway, and that's it. And a barn that more people come out of than should fit into. There are so many great ways to utilize those literary references. Actually, coming back, talking about science fiction a little bit, if you look at the Expanse series, different peoples evolved in different ways because of different parts of the solar system that they lived in. So if you have this fantastical world, and let's say there are floating cities way up in the sky, well, maybe those people evolve a little differently. Maybe they're taller. Maybe they're longer limbed, or people live closer to the core of the earth. Maybe even if they're humanoid, they're super squat and
like dwarves and elves.
Well,
or even
even
the other way around.
Even
taking
taking that
closer and you're taller, and farther and you're shorter.
Yeah, even taking that. Let's say you have a dwarf who lives in a sky city. Maybe that dwarf is 6.5 feet tall, or you have a human, a standard 5'10" human who lives in let's just call it the city of Kor, which is deep down in the earth, and that what would be an average height human mechanically is only 4 feet tall.
Right.
You can pull these different examples from literary references to, in turn, make your world feel so much more unique.
But taking that and like spinning it with question 4 going into literature, completely opposite. Even if you don't want to do like fictional literature, one of my guilty pleasures is if I'm doing a job, like, I'm working from home now, anything like that, I have to have something in the background, whether it's music or something. Yeah. What am I go to? National Geographic documentaries. And and I will say this right now, there has not been a single National Geographic or any type of like cultural or historical documentary that I have not listened to that has not given me an idea.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely amazing, like just sitting there and listening to talking about the different cultures in the world and different things that they deal with, and just like Papua New Guinea, like this little culture off in the middle of nowhere. Did you know they did this? I'm like, ooh, yeah. Wait, that's a good little adventure hook. That's kind of cool, know. And it's learning about the world around you can actually help a lot too, not just fictional worlds. It gives you a good idea. It's like good example of Dust Monks, and
I love it. We've mentioned several times ways to make our world unique, pulling from real world analogies. There are so many really cool options dealing with literature. Actually, another one just popped into my head. The book we all had to read it in school, The Giver.
Oh, that's such a good sci-fi.
Like, why not have a culture, a town, a city? You're playing in a fantastical game, right? So maybe that whole town generations ago gave up all their emotion and gave up their ability to feel and see color and taste different things, or maybe they gave up their ability to feel pain, if we want to take it a different direction, and
for the greater good.
And in the greater good.
The greater good.
And maybe one person in town takes all of their pain into themselves. There's so many
magic.
So many cool ways. Yeah, absolutely. Magic. And then we can get really weird with it. That one person is now a necromancer.
Oh yeah.
Let's run with it.
Oh no. How would that
mess with one person?
You want to put a Bill spin on this?
Let's do it.
Take that story.
Let's do it.
Spin on this? What you would do is you would have an entire town dedicated around the idea that one person, that they were visited by a god a long time ago, that grants them all the blessings in the world. In every generation, one person becomes the avatar of that god. But really what they are is a vessel for a lich.
I'm here for it. Or maybe the lich is actually relatively benevolent,
Right.
And so
Wants to
you
live.
you come across this town, and there are skeletons farming the field. And then you get into the town and everybody's happy and nobody has a job and it's just a life of leisure.
That can happen. Let's just be
Hello,
crazy.
Isaac
That's all.
Asimov.
Let's just be crazy. I love it.
Let's just be crazy.
It's the plot for iRobot, but with Necromancer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, absolutely.
See, I had that idea for a character a long time ago. I want to play a good necromancer. Like, it's, like
It wants to like
he
reduce,
generally
reuse,
wants.
recycle.
Yeah, he generally wants to help people, like, but he keeps just getting it
I love
wrong.
that.
I also want to play the warlock with the undead patron. That's his mother.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know
So
what? You know why you missed? It's because you never call Aunt Sue.
you never bring me grandchildren.
That's all you want to do is cast your magic missiles and your Eldritch Blast.
I have such a hard time with like pulling real life. You guys mentioned National Geographic and tribes in South Africa and stuff. I have a hard time like when I want to bring that into my world. I want to be really careful. I want to make sure I'm not like misrepresenting it or, the big thing nowadays is like I don't want anyone to feel like there's colonialism, like, savage or primitives. I always want to I want to envision this in the best light possible. Let me take this tribe from somewhere, flip it, put it into my world. So like even if it's a literary thing, like just so many things are like just unique things you never hear about.
See, that's
Like
completely
how
easy. That's easy to avoid. You just respect everything you write.
and that's important, and that's why research is important for all of it.
Yeah, and I mean
Um,
that's what it is. I mean, when it comes to monsters fighting humans, okay, the monsters
yeah,
are evil. I get it. But when it comes to a different tribe fighting a different tribe, you got to keep in mind everyone's a hero of their story. There's a episode in Avatar: The Animated Series where he has to get these two tribes through this one really really dangerous region, and they share a
yep,
backstory, and they hate each other. To them, each of their tribe was the hero, and
right.
the reason they were fighting was stupid.
That goes
It's
back to
like
mythology.
I think that was told in a respectable way that both tribe,
Dude,
they're good people.
using
It's like
that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean it's that they were good people. It's like neither of them was savages, but when you want to write something like that, it's not just if you have a tribe, a human tribe, and you're doing something like that, attacking someone else, you got to look at it in the aspect of why are they doing it. If they're just
Yeah,
doing it because they're territorial, it's got to be deeper. It's got to be
yeah,
deeper than that.
Yeah. I I love the idea of everyone's a hero in their own story. Um,
yeah.
uh, uh, the last campaign that we wrapped up last year was the villain was the hero of his own story. He thought he was saving people.
Oh, every villain, classic.
And, there are, we can pull from 1,000 stories, but if you want to get to that really good analogous, like, you just have to hate this guy. Like, start looking at Rome and use Nero as an example. The
Oh yeah,
play the fiddle while the Rome burned. There will be that guy, and you can tell that story in
yeah.
a fantasy setting really, really easily. And he doesn't even
So
have to be a mage.
No,
with 10 minutes left, let's see if we can get this 6-foot question answered.
Absolutely.
okay.
What are some ways you adjust game mechanics to give your world the mood and style you desire?
Bill, I
We're
am tagging you on this one, man. We've been talking about this all day.
okay. Yeah. One thing that comes into Stratera, it's very Lovecraft inspired. I am a big Lovecraft fan. So,
Same.
being a huge Lovecraft fan, he was great inspiration to me growing up. He does have a dark past, but
Yeah,
I love Lovecraft. Well, take it back. I like everything that's in um, Lovecraft when it comes to things such as August Dereth, the mythos, just how he's inspired all these other writers. Um, Stratera is very Lovecraft oriented and very Lovecraft inspired. Always has been for like 20 plus years now. Um, the Sandy Peterson Cthulhu the 5e Mythos book was just a godsend to me. As soon as it came out, I kickstarted it. It's absolutely fantastic. It fits so well into my world. One problem that I'm having is I believe I want a madness system in my world, but I don't want it to be too damning because all the madness systems out there, even the madness system in the DMG, the dread system in Sandy Peterson, it is very unforgiving when it comes to players. It's like I want something that's going to affect the players, but it's not going to be too hindering. And so I'm toying around with Matt Mercer's corruption idea, and I'm going to be tooling it for Straterra going forward. I haven't really touched base with it a lot going through, but that's something Gabriel and I were talking about just today. Matter of fact, but it's retooling, mechanics that fit into your world, and insanity is a thing in Straterra. There's cosmic things out there beyond the dark tapestry that is influencing this world, especially now that magic's gone and certain boundaries are weakening. You know, those are going to have influences on the characters, and I'm going to start doing it through corruption, through failed roles and things like that. And it's something I've been working on for 20 years, and I still haven't perfected it.
But that's a great example of ways to tweak and alter mechanics to make your world feel unique. And you know the balance of that, we've had this conversation a couple of times, is making sure that it stays true to your world, and that everybody who's playing in that is on the same page. Because for me, as soon as you start changing mechanics, everybody needs to be on the same page. We want to make sure we're playing the same game.
Yeah,
And
it's like I didn't
Right.
make this decision just to myself. I'm approaching my players in the game right now, and I have actually opened up the world of Straterra to all of the Forever DMs in case they want to play a game in there. So it comes to everybody.
but that
I'm
what
into it.
adding that level of helps create a feel, and it makes that world so incredibly unique, and it adds to the richness and darkness that you're experiencing there. Finding ways to tweak and alter the mechanics to make your world feel unique and make it memorable. Great example for me is finding ways to incorporate magic in unique ways that are kind of outside the normal boundaries of what D&D mechanics hold. Recently, in one of our games, we discovered a place of power, a place rich with some sort of mystical energy. How that will, not in big ways by any means, but it is a small thing that will create a unique twist on a mechanical force within our game that we will get to explore. So there are lots of ways to branch out and change game mechanics to make your world feel unique.
My favorite rule in Dungeons and Dragons is that the dungeon master can do whatever he wants. And then my second favorite rule is that every rule should be bent. And then my third favorite rule is the rule of cool.
Rule of cool, always.
I can't tell you how many times I've made a dumb decision for the rule of cool, but it was absolutely worth it. Like I have bent spell slot components. I have changed the way that magic works. I have changed features of classes just because it was so cool. And in the end of the day, like I want to tell a good story, and I want my players to feel like they're a central part of that story, and that's important.
The way I say it to new DMs out there is if your player's coming up to you with a really, really interesting idea and they're passionate about it, do your best you can to work with them. It's like, okay, if they want to come in and play a god that can never be killed, yeah, that might be a problem. But if they come in, they go, I want to play a paladin that doesn't have a deity.
Yeah.
But I don't want them to be an oathbreaker. Okay, well, let's have you play a paladin that is sworn to their creed, sworn to their oath.
Uh,
And they're
So
I've done that.
Yeah,
Oath of the Ancients. It was a paladin
yeah.
who was empowered by his ancestors.
I
I
have
mean, a good
yeah. Go ahead.
no, it's like along those lines. It's like Jacob came up to me and said, "I want to play Oliver, and
Yeah.
I want to play a Furbog, and I want to play a someone who's from a tribe that their ancestors are actually guardians of them, and I want to be able
Mhm.
to roll bones and stuff like that." And I was like, "Okay," and we ran with it. And every aspect of the classes he takes, I completely trust Jacob to mix it into his backstory in
Yeah.
that way. And it's like, oh, well, okay, he's a barbarian. Well, his rage comes from being possessed by his ancestors. That's awesome. Okay, well, now he's an Echo Knight. Well, he manifests one of his ancestors that swaps places with him on the battlefield. Absolutely awesome. It's like still works in the mechanics, but thematically, it works with his character.
You know,
I
I
think if you trust your players enough, that works every
Yeah.
time.
absolutely. I think that as we're kind of getting close to the end here, um, I I think instead of adjusting mechanics, uh, one of the best ways, in my opinion, to make things feel unique to both the characters and to the world is to reskin them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Flavor.
the Oliver is a Furbolg, ancestral guardian, barbarian, and Echo Knight fighter. And so everything he's doing is the powers of his ancestors manifesting. In that same game, Benyahim, the character I'm playing, almost every one of his spells has been reskinned as his big old brain. He is telepathic, telekinetic, like everything is him expanding his mind and the powers of his mind. You can take things and reskin them so that mechanically they're still the same. One of the greatest examples that we use as a group all the time is, what does that spell look like?
Yeah,
And
my favorite.
your bow of a chaos bolt, like, it looks like a magical bow, but in fact it is just a spell.
Yeah.
You can, and Bill, I'll give you tons of credit for this, for trusting your players. You can re-theme things to fit the world you live in really, really easily.
Mm.
But I mean, it's messing with mechanics, reskinning things. It's like in Straterra, a long time ago, my best friend had a character named Rubicon the Ageless, who was he's a hero, he's a legend in the game because most of our characters, our PCs, are now legends or heroes of myth in this world. But he wanted to play a perpetually 12-year-old boy who's actually like 100-something years old. He was cursed. He never ages, hence the name Rubicon the Ageless. His familiar was for a long time it was his cat. He kept changing familiars, everything. But the familiar was his spell book, as in he would snap a finger and this cat would run up his arm and into a spell book, and he would have the spell book in his hand. No mechanics for that, but that's awesome.
The
It's
description.
like, yeah,
Flavor text.
it just goes into it. It's like, okay, so he has a spell book that, he gets poofed away. He's got a no find familiar to call his spell book back, but it's a great way to bring it in, to bring a flavor into the game and change a little bit of mechanics.
Absolutely.
You,
You guys are gonna love this. I made a character with Tiffany once. We worked together on this. I wanted to play a warlock, and I hate the edgelord warlock. I didn't want to do that. This is not Reese. This is someone else. And so I came up with the idea for a character, and his patron would be himself, and he was a disgraced demon who had been shunted into a human body, and was limited in all of his faculties into what a human could do, even though he was drawing upon his old power. So as a warlock, his patron was himself, but he was stuck in this fleshy body that was just miserable, and he had to eat, and he had to sleep, and he had to walk. And so it was the idea that here's a human. Mechanically, he's a human warlock, but like the idea of this brain of like I'm reduced to this pile of goo. I hate this. Was the perfect idea for a character.
You're the episode where
And
Q lost his powers.
Yep.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so it's just this, and but like he finds out that like he loves bread and like cats. Like
yeah.
he finds like human pleasure is simple, but like he still hates that he has to walk everywhere, and he hates that he has to eat food and like actually go to the bathroom. Like
It
who does this?
makes me think of Agent Smith from
Yes,
the Matrix trilogy.
yeah.
Okay,
Flavoring is everything.
so we're gone. We try to shoot for an hour. Got an
Always
hour and
wind up an
30
hour and a
minutes.
half. Yeah.
Hey,
That's
we went
fine.
over an hour and a half now. So that answers the questions. Thank you all very much for spending the afternoon with us or night with us, talking for the last hour and 30 minutes with us, talking about D&D, talking about world building. Those of you that follow Forever DMs, you know what's coming. Thrain, our next shot D&D game will be Thrain, which is on March 30th, 7 p.m., which is next Tuesday.
Stuck in a
7 p.m.
hole.
Eastern.
Eastern Standard Time here. Stuck in a hole.
Yep.
So we look forward to that. And the following Saturday will be Breakfast and Dragons, April 3rd, 9 a.m. As the party gets back together, Jacob returns. We did a special one shot this Saturday, which actually was amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
I loved it.
and the party will be finally, maybe finally stepping into Broken Gate, which could be interesting. Those of you that are new viewers, be sure to follow us on Twitter, follow us here. Shoot
Yes.
us an email. Tell us you like us. Tell us you hate us. And if you tell us you hate us, tell us how we can make it better. And if you really, really hate us, write your complaints on $100 bill and send it to me. I will personally read it, and I will make sure we do something about it. So
Also, stay
Awesome.
tuned because we got cool stuff coming. I'm writing adventures and stuff.
oh yeah, we've
I
got
can't
a
wait to
lot
do
of
some one shot.
you got a lot of really cool adventures and ideas and things coming up. It's like keep in touch, watch it, we'll catch you then. Okay.
Whoop, whoop. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Yeah.
Bye.
Night.